Hello everybody, my name is Chara. Welcome to me summarizing classics lore. Now, bear in mind this is not fully scripted. If I were to fully script this thing, this would take me a couple weeks. I'm gonna be honest, I just wrote out the plot points. It took up 3 whole pages. Yeah, just for just the base summary. Anyways, let's start. It all starts off with Chara and his Frisk doing another genocide run. But this genocide run was a little different than the rest. Near the end, Frisk demanded for their soul back. As you can expect, Chara was a little bit, quote unquote, a little bit, hesitant to give it back. But in the end, he gave it back out of sheer pressure. And then, well, Chara started fading in and out of Ghost. I think we all know that part, but anyways. Then Frisk decided to give the soul back to Chara after telling their concerns to Sans, but that's beside the point. After that, Chara just felt Frisk's kindness. For whatever reason, he couldn't understand it himself. But, so, after that, Frisk returned to their more cruel ways, while Chara just wanted to help them. They tried to offer a lot of solutions. None of them were viable or could work. So, Frisk, Chara did try their best. In the end, Frisk said the words that still haunt Chara to this very day. See ya, Chara. And then they just vanish. And meanwhile, Shift and Blue were watching this, and Chara started crying like crazy. Chara retreats to a floating island for a little to process. Eventually visits Shift for a little bit of help. They ask Shift if there's any way they can help get a soul for Frisk. He knew it was a gamble and all, but he was willing to take the gamble. To his surprise, Shift said yes, and so they went on to another AU. This would be Chara's last genocide run. Chara got that AU's quote-unquote Frisk. It really isn't a Frisk. It was Horror's Shift. Anyways. But they had a Determination Soul which was compatible. That doesn't matter. They got them to do the genocide run, got their soul, and kept it in safe keeping. After that, Chara was doing his own thing when they met, well, Essence Frisk. I'm calling it Essence Frisk, but I don't know the correct name. I had to base this purely off memory, by the way, because Classics lore was never shown on stream. Anyways, they talked to him a bit before just snapping in and out, before telling them that it's only a matter of time until they'll have to fight. And reminder at this point, Chara was not the same level of strength, and refused to show his Super Saiyan or any of his Saiyan's side. So Chara got his ass whooped, but then he heard a voice telling him to not lose hope. Something sparked within him, giving him the power of hope, just to beat that opponent. But soon after, he lost that power. He doesn't know how to access it to this day. Then, back where he was keeping the soul, on his floating island, pretty much, someone visited him. Most of you might know him. What he refers to as Geno. It's Geno Essence, just to specify. Geno was looking for a soul to basically combat something. They tried to get the Frisk soul from Chara, but Chara went like, I needed to save my Frisk. Fight broke out. Geno did not end up biting the dust, if memory serves correctly. But for the time being, they were not allies or friends. Time will change. In the time, that will change. But that's beside the point. Chara ended up defeating it. Well, not it. Them. They left. Now we come on to the first encounter with hate. Chara figured it was about time that he built a home outside of the sky home that the island, the floating island. So he was gathering materials. He met up with hate by accident. Chara was already suspicious, but then hate threw the potion on, the hate potion on Chara. Just a way to kill him, practically. Taunting him. In the process, Chara absorbed all that hate. Because, again, hatred towards humanity. And once he did, at the time, he did not know how to control it. He just flat out killed hate. Like, no mercy, no struggling. It was just, bam, dead. Out of pure anger and, his genocidal ways. But he soon reverted back to normal. English. Then he was just on his island again because he was like, okay, I can't do much. Just farming, because that was literally his way of coping. Then, for the second time, he saw hate. He was confused, but he already put up his guard. But hate put on an act, saying they changed. Chara believed in it because he went for Frisk. I will honor their legacy. And a few days pass. Hate actually gets to learn a bit about Chara. But then Hate acted out of the norm. Chara, out of his stupidity, wanted to and wanting to quote unquote help, gave them a hate potion. But that was just the cue to drop the act. They immediately turned on Chara and proceeded to splash him with a hate potion that was much more effective. They tried to control Chara, but his sheer mental will stopped him from being controlled. After that, hate got pushed off the island. Chara made the hate box. Trapped himself in there just to make sure he's not a danger to anybody else. He was still mentally struggling to keep himself under control. After that, he made sure it was only a one-way entrance. The only way to open it is from the outside. He was in there for 15 years, mastered the form, mastered his mental stability in the form. One day, the box opened. He was startled. He didn't want to hurt anybody. At the time, it turned out to be Essence. He had no idea who it was. Oh yeah, I glossed over something that happened beforehand. US Papyrus did try to steal Chara's soul for no reason, but that's beside the point. That's why MC, Classic, DMC, GC, basically anybody that goes off of Classic's branch kinda doesn't like US Papyrus. But anyways, when the door opened, he was frightened, but Essence didn't attack. They helped him, and well, times passed. Soon after, Azrael reappeared. He didn't know why. It's actually still big why and how, but it didn't matter. Chara was crying. He hugged Azrael. Azrael, even though, despite Chara being in his hate form, they recognized him. They hugged him back. They were happy. A bit of time, a bit of time passes, and in that time frame, Essence did die. Can't remember exactly how, but they died. But Gino said there was a way to save them. Going to hell and retrieving the soul. Chara was, of course, on board with the plan. They went down to hell. Little did he realize, oh, this is gonna be a bad idea. He had to fight, but he didn't care. But then it leads to the fight with corrupted Essence. It was one of the toughest fights he had to date. He managed to come out on top, barely. Essence was still alive at the time. After the fight, it was nighttime out. They needed to get rest. But Chara felt something off. So they went to check up on Essence. And they said, "What are you doing here?" to Chara. Chara said, "Something's off. Are you okay?" Essence wanted to not show him that they were going to die again. Chara was devastated. He was hugging Essence, and then they died in his arms. And Chara was, crying like crazy. But for an understandable reason, I would say. A bit more time passes. And he returns to his home one day just to see Gino and Azriel hurt. And also, I forgot to mention, yes, in this time frame, Gino did become friends with Chara. He asked what the hell happened. Turns out Hate came back with a partner. At that moment, he was already furious. He told Azriel he'll be back soon. Azriel heavily protested against this, but Chara said, "They hurt you, I won't allow it." Oh, one of the most infamous fights for Chara. Fighting Hate. This lasted 3 days. Running from their special hell attack. Dodging and not having time to rest or eat properly, but he was worn out at one point. He got hit to the ground. He thought he was done for, but then he heard Azriel telling Hate to well, leave him alone, but soon he heard the noise of them dying. At that moment, Chara exploded in anger, devastating the landscape around them. Hate tried to hurt him, but he just tanked it all. Chara at that point was so furious. All he could see was Hate. And all that was on his mind was murdering them. And not going Super Saiyan, because at the time, he still wanted to hide the form. But then, he just killed Hate. After that, he went after their partner, the strongest Chara in the multiverse. He had a little bit of trouble thanks to his fatigue, because he didn't have time to rest up, but he didn't care. Thanks to his Zenkai, which no one knew about but him, he was able to beat them with more ease than Hate. After that, Chara went into kind of a state of depression for a little, but he found out Azriel was still alive somehow. He was confuzzled, but he didn't care too much. His brother was alive. Well, his brother as we know it, but at the time he just said best friend because too embarrassed to admit it. After that, he was still down in the dumps. One day, Chara was still trying to get over his hatred towards humanity. He went into the village and saw a little stand. That's where he met EC. EC claimed that they traveled back in time to save Chara from a horrible disaster. And it was truly essence. Chara was, happy to see them again, but was confused. Why were they wearing a jacket? They explained that it was their brothers. He was like, wait, your Azriel wears a jacket? They confirmed that. That part of the history was true. One day, he was just... So, bedtime passes again. And then the torches, or his lights, whatever, turn red. And all of a sudden, Essence comes back to life. Chara was already on the ready to fight, but he saw Essence. He like, what the hell? Essence was initially furious because the Azrael that died, that was their Azrael. Chara apologized a lot, but in the end they ended up getting along again. And then Chara met Rose. He was confused about Rose because they were a goat, but they had a traitless soul, but he didn't know about this at the time. But he didn't care. They got along pretty well. After that, I don't know how long, but someone, I can't remember if it was like Gina, well I know it wasn't Gina, it was either Essence or Rose or EC that told him to go visit Gino, or Gino visited him, I can't remember, to be honest, because something happened to his soul. Apparently Char couldn't fight or kill anything, or else he would get corrupted. So he was devastated, but he agreed not to fight. But things kept attacking. He was holding off the best he could. He was getting worn out. But one night, a bunch of things started attacking his Azrael. He finally snapped and killed everything that was trying to hurt Azrael. Before he got corrupted, he told Azrael to run. They did. What happened then was Rose beating the living shit out of Chara before he became uncorrupted. And Chara was grateful, but in a lot of pain. And at this point, Chara and Azrael had their own house, but it was infected by spiders, and Chara's scared of spiders, thanks to my fear of spiders, actually. So they temporarily moved into Rose's house. But Rose had a machine in their basement that allowed to see into alternate timelines. So Chara got curious, like he did, back in the earlier days. Remember, he was much more reckless back in the earlier days. So he went down there to see what was up. Went into an alternate timeline. He saw his own decapitated head with an eyeball missing. He nearly barfed at the sight of that. He left. So one day, he was just staying in Rose's home because Rose told him to look after their home while they did something. But then he heard beeping coming from the basement. He didn't know any better. He thought, maybe I should go check on it. That was a warning not to do what Chara did. Funny. But it allowed alternate timelines to cross over into his. Oh boy. That caused multiple Roses to be there. But there was one thing that separated him from the rest of the Charas. He fought to protect Azrael. not himself. But, so, then, so he had to go up against, so there was a few roses, but there was one rose that he was concerned about. A rose that wanted to eradicate every Chara because of what happened in their timeline. Chara had to come up with a system to find out if it was their rose or not. They did. But for about 6 months, Chara did not sleep. If you're asking how did he function, don't know. Eventually he needed to rest a little. When he woke up, and this was after his rose told him, if I don't win this fight, after you beat them, reset. He was surprised that they had confidence in him, but didn't matter. They had to fight that rose. It was a tough and long battle, but he did it. After that, he reset. But he kept his memories. But something was off. Every monster was gone, except Azrael. So they traveled to the underground. Azrael eventually understood Chara was telling the truth about him knowing the future somewhat. But then Azrael went off to search for everyone, including Toriel and Asgore. A letter came out of nowhere saying, meet me in the Judgment Hall, to Chara. Chara was curious enough to find out what he did. He found Rose. A human Rose, somewhat, but still Rose. He was confused. He was on guard. Without a weapon, of course, but still. They explained the situation. Evil him, or the alternate timeline him, that's still corrupted, was still loose. They need more power to beat them. They asked for Chara's soul temporarily. Chara obliges, but said, you better give me my body back, and my soul. After that, they went into battle. Point proven. It was a pretty easy battle. Rose reset. But then something strange happened. No one appeared but those two. Rose then asked the question once they got to Snowden. How many resets has Chara done? And at that point, he lost track. He said, probably 1,100 or so. Rose panicked and said, after 100 resets, that's enough for a timeline to become corrupted. Chara realized the, consequences. But they actually found a way to fix everything. Kinda. Chara returns to where he was from originally. Like, before the alternate timelines happened. But everything was still there. But Rose didn't exist any longer. It was confusing to him. Fast forward a little, by a year or so, Rose appears as a goat again, but traitless. No emotions. Before that, Chara actually found a journal explaining traitless to him. And he wanted to help Rose, but that didn't happen. Oh yeah, did I mention Essence again died in that time frame. But basically, after that, Rose decided to bring back everyone that Chara has fought in the past. And one other person, by accident. They brought back Essence. Essence obliterated almost everybody that Chara did fight in the past, so those fights didn't repeat. But after that, Chara tried to get some sleep, but he kept having nightmares thanks to a seance that was affecting them. Essence at that point had the same thing as Chara did, the corruption. He warned Essence, but Essence thought they had a workaround. They didn't. Essence came back corrupted. Chara and Essence duked it out for a little. Chara was on the ground, bleeding out. That's when his future self came into play. He thought his past self was already unconscious. So he tried to fight, but he started phasing in and out of existence. Between the punches, he ended up fading away. But not for the reasons you think. But little did he know, well, the future self know, Chara actually kind of saw them. But then Chara dies, but for the first time, he went to heaven instead of hell. And he saw EC again. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, EC did die in this time frame. They told us, Chara about traitless being powerful. But you still can save Essence. He did. He went back. Defending, fighting, and talking Essence out of it. Eventually, Essence snapped back to normal. But at a hefty price, Chara died. And it took about a year or two for Chara to come fully back. After that, a bit more stuff happens, but he finally finds his Frisk again. They got the soul, and they got out. Chara one night was having nightmares, and Frisk was at his house. And Chara accidentally went Super Saiyan right in front of Frisk. And he tried to play it off, but yeah, Frisk wasn't an idiot. And found out the info. Chara told them he was scared to tell anyone. Frisk understood this, and, well, that led to that. And then, after that, Chara was hanging out with Frisk. And then Frisk wandered off. With Azrael, Dusttail Sands appeared. But then his future self appeared again. Went Super Saiyan 2 out of fury. Proceeded to beat the living shit out of Dusttail Sands, saying, "You're not hurting them. Not again." Soon, again vanished. Then we go to a time skip. The reason the time skip happens is because the RP effectively kind of died off. But that's beside the point. Time skip happens. So, remember all the time travel shenanigans? Thanks to that, that made the AU kind of unstable. If it wasn't unstable enough already. What happened next was, as we all jump scared him, he powered up by accident, causing the AU to start falling in on itself. Chara knew the only way to stop it was to go through one of the cracks. He made a promise to come back one day. Little did he know, he would lose all his memories. Time passes. He regains his memories. And after an AU hop or so, he finds himself back in his AU. Just things have changed. But then, well, if you kept up with the current classic lore, he revived DC and Rose. And, well, after a while, EC wanted to go back to their AU just for a little. Then they returned out to Chara's confusion, but it was hate. Hate possessed EC. Chara got EC hate to flee, captured them, and now Chara started stuffing out hate throughout the multiverse. Then, well, nothing much has happened, but other than with what he is currently doing with helping out with the clock creature, Ultra Time Ring, and hanging out with another Chara Gabe. But that's for another time. Pun intended, by the way. I hope you all enjoy the summary of Classics lore. I know I skipped a bunch. I might have skipped a bunch of things, but hey, it's summary of lore that I needed to get out there. We decided to do Classic first. Yeah. Buddy, I need it to do a lot of other lore. Well, summarize other lore of other Chara games. So, that is it. This is the summary of Classic. Hope you all enjoyed.